So it's the beginning of the month, and as usual, I'm going to go through a 2018 Senate prediction and a 2018 governor prediction, but I'm going to start off with the Senate, and another video will be the governor prediction. So today's July 1st, 2018, and we're coming up pretty close to the 2018 midterm election. So we have time to go through a number of these predictions just to go through each particular state, the ones with Democratic and Republican incumbents, and see how each political party is doing pretty well. So again, this map is an uphill climb for Democrats. They have 23 seats in their column, and the Republicans have 42 with 35 contested seats. You could argue California has no chance of going to the Republicans because it doesn't, but again, we're taking that one out of the equation, just talking about the Senate landscape. So the Republicans have a number of opportunities for a pickup. They could hold on to all of their seats, which give them 49, and then they could expand on a few. They could carry a number of Trump states because 11 of these states went to Donald Trump in 2016, and some by extremely large margins. And the Republican Party is looking to take a number of these seats, but when we're looking at the map, mildly popular Democratic incumbents are probably going to do pretty well in these races as well. So the Republican Party can't count on too much. But again, there are always states that will never flip up in the Northeast. Pretty much almost every video that we do a Senate prediction, these states are not going to flip from Democratic to Republican just based off how Democratic they've gotten and the popularity of the incumbents. In Minnesota, mentioning the popularity of the incumbent, Amy Klobuchar is an extremely popular incumbent. She's probably not going to lose. Over in Virginia, Tim Kaine is not going to lose. Corey Stewart is a Trump-like candidate. Trump did pretty bad in Virginia in 2016. And then 2017 rolled around and a huge wave against the Republican Party occurred in the state of Virginia. Don't expect much for Republicans in the state of Virginia. But again, there are some states that are solid for the GOP, including states like Wyoming, Nebraska, Utah now with Mitt Romney, Mississippi special election. And now that puts the Republicans at 47 seats, okay? That's not necessarily the best thing for the Democratic Party. They are only 3 away from holding their majority because of Vice President Mike Pence. And the Democrats need a lot more. I mean, they're going to need 14 more seats, and it is possible. There are some other states that are probably in their column right now. But again, when we're looking at the map, it's not going to be the easiest for Democrats to do. So across the Rust Belt, though, we pretty much don't see any firm Republican opposition. Pennsylvania's not going red, Michigan's not going red, and Wisconsin is not going red, just based off the popularity of the incumbents and their 2012 re-elections. And when we're looking at the map, and looking at the way that the voters view them, they're not the type Hillary Clinton type Democrats. They're not those type of Democrats who would lose in states like this, and their Republican opponents are no Donald Trumps. They're not someone who can drastically change the mindset of the Rust Belt overnight. And again, Donald Trump is the only Donald Trump who could ever do what he did. But looking at this map, Republicans aren't going to do so well in the Rust Belt, which is why they aren't focusing a lot in there. They're not focusing a lot in that Senate election, and they don't even have a front runner in the special election either for the GOP. So again, the Rust Belt's going to be a little solid for the Democrats, but it probably won't be solid in the presidential election. Speaking of presidential election, I'm going to do my Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump prediction tomorrow. That's something that you guys might like, but again, at the beginning of every month, I always do Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Hillary Clinton, the same type of Democratic candidates. And the reason why I do Hillary Clinton is because she's that base model to see if Democrats have done more or done less based off the model for Hillary Clinton. But enough talking about that. We're going to go through this map still. So New Mexico is probably going for the Democrats. We really don't see a possibility of a Republican victory in New Mexico just based off, again, how partisan the state has gotten. So this puts the Democrats at 42, the Republicans at 47. And now we're going to look at some areas with some weak Republican candidates. We talk about Montana. They have a weak Republican candidate. Matt Rosendale, again, not known statewide, and John Tester is mildly popular for a Democrat in Montana. Don't really expect him to lose. The GOP isn't focusing on Montana. They're focusing on the surrounding state, Nevada, but they're not focusing on Montana either. Or they're not focusing on Ohio. They don't have a good GOP candidate. They're only one pulled out of the race because of his wife's health. And now they have the nominees. And the GOP isn't going to focus on Ohio too much. They're going to focus, again, on surrounding states like Indiana and West Virginia, which voted for the president more than Ohio did. And they show a much more bigger opportunity for a pickup for the Republican Party. But there actually is a state that I forgot to fill in, and that's the state of Texas. So people think Texas could become close. And I understand your argument that Texas could possibly flip in the future, but 2018 is not the year. Okay, people are already saying 2020 is not the year. 2024 is the year in my opinion. But 2022 could be as early as it gets. But 2020 is going to be not that likely. 2018 is completely out. I understand the fundraising gap, and Ted Cruz is not that good of an incumbent, but he's pretty popular, 49% approval rating. That's pretty good for someone who was just previously on the presidential stage and hated by a number of Americans. And Texas is still a Republican state. They still have that Republican identity. I understand with the whole new immigration thing, that could definitely boost the Democrats. It's not going to be enough to put them over the top, over someone like Ted Cruz. But looking at this map, 44 Democrats, 48 Republicans. So the Republican Party is going to do pretty well in some other states, but now we're going to start filling in some of the states that are going to be flips from the Republican to the Democratic Party. So Nevada, I see that one flipping. It's not that hard to see how Dean Heller, one of the most unpopular senators in the United States, could lose his reelection bid. Jackie Rosen is extremely popular, and again, she definitely appeals to minority voters a lot better, and minority voters are going to be one of the key voting groups in the 2018 midterms, especially in Democratic states like Nevada. Donald Trump did not carry the state, Republican incumbent against a Republican, and a pro-Democratic wave year. All the factors are against Dean Heller. He'll probably lose there. Looking over in Arizona, almost every opinion poll shows Kristen Sinema against, all opinion polls show her ahead of her Republican opponents, some by double digits, and that is crazy considering it's a state like Arizona. It drastically changed from 2012 being overwhelmingly Republican down to a swing state in 2016, and now all of a sudden it's leaning Democratic in the Senate race. But I think this one is a pure toss-up, but I still think that Kristen Sinema is going to narrowly edge this one out. But again, anything can happen between now and November, so I'm not putting money on this prediction just yet, maybe once we get to October. But looking at this map, Arizona and Nevada, two things that are going to be striking to the core of the GOP because these are areas that they previously had held for such a long time, and now all of a sudden it's going to the Democrats. But you can't say it wasn't expected just based off this year. Looking at the map, there are some states that are still going to go Democratic. West Virginia, as crazy as it sounds, Joe Manchin is pretty popular, and he is a conservative Democrat, so I do expect him to win in that state. West Virginia, I expect narrowly to go to the Democrats, but the GOP also isn't doing that well when we look at the national generic ballot poll. Back when I made the previous prediction at a 50-50 scenario, the GOP was at a higher point in the generic ballot poll than they are today, and that's not good for them. They should be expanding it if they want to prevent the Democrats from going up higher and higher by the time we reach the 2018 midterms. And again, it could be anything can happen. I'm not going to say the Democrats are going to keep continuously going up because the Republicans could pull ahead or possibly make it more competitive, but the Republicans aren't at the best of standpoints. Their approval rating amongst the American people isn't too high as well. Neither is the Democratic Party, but again, people are always looking to oppose the president any way they can. So when looking at this map, it's going to be a little bit difficult to call a couple states, but right now we're going to go down to the state of Florida, and I know opinion polling shows Rick Scott ahead, but neither candidate is above 50%. And Bill Nelson is a mildly popular senator. Rick Scott, I understand coming from the governor's office and trying to go into the Senate race, but it's extremely hard to beat an incumbent, someone who is with the party that is against the president in a midterm election year. It's extremely hard to win. I understand you may see, I would understand how you could project a Rick Scott victory in a 2016 presidential election year or a 2020 presidential election year, but this is a midterm election year. Republicans aren't going to be turning out in numbers that they do normally, and Democrats are going to be turning out in exceeding numbers. We're not really calculating that in. When we're looking and we're polling likely voters, we're not factoring in that new wave of voters, those new type of people that are going to come out. And opinion polling is typically wrong. You guys, not you guys, but some people like to point to it when it's in their favor and then point away from it when it's not in their favor. Opinion polling is something that I trust. I trust it for approval ratings, and I trust it for generic ballot polls. But when we're looking at states like Florida and we're looking at a number of other states, I made this point clear in a number of my videos. When neither candidate is above 50%, that's not a good sign for either political party. We see it in Arizona, but again, these leads by Kristen Sinema are larger than Rick Scott's leads in Florida. So Rick Scott also isn't necessarily the best type of candidate. Keep in mind, he won both of his election bids in Republican wave years by narrow margins. And you could also argue that Florida is a toss-up state, but Florida overwhelmingly voted for a number of other candidates in Republican wave years. So the argument doesn't stand. It's because Rick Scott wasn't necessarily the most popular person in the state of Florida. Right now, his approval rating's going up a little bit on the rise, so we could see a possibility of me putting this one in the Republican column in the future. But right now, I still see a Bill Nelson narrow victory here. Going down to Tennessee, Phil Bredesen, that's one that I really am contested about. Tennessee is going to be something that's going to be focused on a lot, but Tennessee, if the Republicans lose here, they're losing in a number of other states in the future, not in presidential election years, but I mean when it comes to the Senate, because a number of other Democrats are going to see possibilities of winning here. Former governors, former conservative Democrats do have a possibility of winning if Phil Bredesen does win here. I don't see Marsha Blackburn winning as of today because, again, when we're looking at the Phil Bredesen approval rating polls from when he left office, above 70%. He is known across the state, and Donald Trump attacked him for being a corporate Democrat and a Pelosi elitist, and that didn't really resonate with Tennessee voters because of the fact, it resonated with his base, but his base only goes so far. When we're looking at a number of these independent, Republican-leaning conservative voters, they are more likely to go to Phil Bredesen, especially with the opposition to the president right now. I understand it still is a state like Tennessee, but there's a reason why pundits are calling this a toss-up state. There's a reason why Phil Bredesen has made this race competitive, and it's because he has a great possibility of winning, and right now opinion polling is showing in that direction. And again, neither candidate is above 50%, so I can't make an accurate indication, but based off prior data, I do see Phil Bredesen narrowly winning here, just based off his name recognition and what he did for the state of Tennessee back when he left office, pretty much the 2000s. So this puts the Democrats at 49 seats and the Republicans at 48. You know what? I actually see the Republicans carrying Missouri, and the reason behind that is Josh Hawley's approval ratings, numbers are probably going to go up with the governor, the governor resigning. That's going to be something that's beneficial to him because he's not going to be as scandal prone. He's not going to be tied to the governor as much as if he was in office. So Missouri is probably going to go to the Republicans because of Claire McCaskill's unpopularity. And also Josh Hawley's probably going to get a number of Republican voters, but Austin Peterson could also impact this election in one way or another in moving them to a writing candidate or another type candidate. But right now, Claire McCaskill is going to have a tough time winning. Before I had her winning in this seat, and I think this one's going to be watched a lot. Unless Josh Hawley messes up like what happened in 2012, we're not going to see that safe of a race or likely or leaning of the race for the Democratic Party. This is going to be a pure toss-up, if not leaning for the Republicans. So now we have 49 seats for the Republicans, 49 seats for the Democrats. I see North Dakota going for the Republicans. This puts them at the majority, giving them a tie with the Democrats if they carry Indiana. And the reason why I'm giving North Dakota to Kevin Cramer is because Heidi Heitkamp, again, her approval rating dropped a little bit, actually a lot. And she's not doing too well when it comes to the state itself, and people are already starting to have firm opposition to her, even on the Democratic side. Some progressives are already starting to take offense on her and, not focusing on the seat a lot. The Democrats aren't focusing much on North Dakota as they should be. They should be focusing a lot more funds in that state. But again, when we're looking at this map, there's a lot that's going to be changed. So when we go down to the state of Indiana, that one I actually see narrowly going to the Democrats. And before you yell at me for that, I understand that everyone wants to argue that Mike Brown's going to win here. He's a political outsider. He's a Donald Trump, but Joe Donnelly, mildly popular. He's a Democratic incumbent. And the reason why I waited so long to film this state is because this one is actually one of the most closest, extremely close races. And the reason behind that is Indiana is one of those states that was always solidly Republican until 2008. And then 2012 it was solid again. Then 2016 it was solid again. But we see in some off years, Democrats do have a possibility of winning in this state. And Indiana isn't the state with the most partisan voters. They will vote for a Democrat and a Republican on the same ballot by around the same margins just based off their issue, because they are pretty much issue voters. They vote on certain issues, they vote on certain candidates, and they're not just all Republican. They don't flip that switch and it goes Republican, Republican, Republican. And they go through each candidate and they know them pretty well. It's not as partisan as other states may be. But when we're looking at this map, we have a 50-50 tie with the Republicans taking the majority and finishing off with, wow, that's a lot of red up across the heart of the country, which previously we saw a little bit blue in Missouri or North Dakota. But right now, it's a little bit same numbers, but the areas are sort of pulling apart. We see the same type of draw in the Democratic areas, including the Rust Belt, the Sun Belt, which is turning a little bit more Democratic. But in these Republican areas, we're not seeing much blue. Maybe Alabama, which is a special case, Tennessee, which will be a special case soon, and then Florida as well. So again, the areas are pretty much pulling away from each other because of the ideologies of each area. But again, the Democrats finish off with 50. The Republicans finish off with 50. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.